Next up, our special guest this week is Mynda Treacy. Mynda Treacy is the proprietor over at myonlinetraininghub.com, where they train on, my gosh, Word, Excel, Outlook, pretty much everything. And whenever I spoke with Mynda before, we did an interview once before where she said that although she teaches all that stuff, her passion, her day in, day out, what she really loves is Excel. She's an Excel nerd. So, Mynda, thank you so much for coming to the program. Thank you for joining us. Would you mind saying hello and telling everybody a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Thanks for having me. It's an honor.
Yes, welcome.
So I'm coming to you all the way from sunny Queensland in Australia. We're on the East Coast. It's 11:15 a.m. here, so I'm missing out on the beverages that everyone else is having. I've got boring water. I've been using Excel for about 19 years. I first started using it when I worked in London in investment banking. Actually, the first spreadsheet program I used was Lotus 123, but shortly after that we switched to Excel, and I lived and breathed it, and I just loved it. And then about 11 years ago, my husband and I moved back to Australia, and where we live, there's no investment banks, so we worked with small businesses, and my background's accounting. So I did my accounting work with small businesses, and my husband did his IT consulting. And we'd come home and talk about our day, and we'd exchange stories on how we'd been asked all these questions from people about how to use Excel, Word, or Outlook, and we just thought, these are really basic, sort of fundamental things everybody should know, and they just don't. And when we looked into classroom-based training, we could sort of understand why. You know, to lose an employee for a day in a small business, it's just a massive impact on the workload, but also it's expensive. So we knew how to use the programs, and we thought, well, let's build a website where we can provide this training online. And so we did, and that was 4 years ago.
Wow, it seems like you add to your blog, you know, more than week, like several times a week almost, you know, or at least weekly. You're adding content out there, mostly around Excel.
Yeah, once a week. I tend to write an Excel blog post once a week.
So I really want to dive into dashboards, particularly since you're giving away a year's worth of training to the person who wins this. We want to get an idea of what they're getting. And also, Jordan is writing a book on dashboards, and you combine that with, I just came back from a conference where I was speaking on dashboards, and I really just want to dive into it and understand, you know, whenever you teach dashboards in your classes, is it more the technical aspects of how they do A, B, and C to create a dashboard, or is there any kind of theory that you teach? What brings you to that, and what does a person get whenever they take a dashboarding class with you?
Yeah, I try to provide a broad spectrum of training on dashboarding. So we start with, you know, fundamentals of what is a dashboard, and then we look at design, and we look at the best way to structure your data, because as you know, if you get the data wrong at the beginning, it's kind of useless. And then we look at loads of different ways we can present that data. So what charts suit what type of data and what message you're trying to convey. And then we look at how we can analyze the data, automate updating it, and then sort of finally putting all those pieces together into a dashboard, and ways to format it quickly, and lots of tricks along the way. You know, Excel's hugely powerful, but the built-in sort of point-and-click charts that you get are very limited. So and one of the things I want to share with you today is a little trick that I use to make the dashboards interactive, so that when you send that report to somebody, they can pick and choose the view and filter the data to suit their needs. So it's not just a one-dimensional report that you print out. It's something that can meet multiple people's needs in the one report without you having to go and reinvent the wheel every time, and sort of, you know, cut down your workload, but answer lots of questions with it. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. And it's all presented in videos. So once you sign up, you've got access to the entire course. You can do it at your own pace and watch them over and over again. You know, one of the things that I know from my own experience when you do training is that you go to a course and you might make a lot of notes. Some people don't. and then you get back to your desk and you've got 100 emails to deal with, and 3 weeks go by and you haven't done anything on the course. So the beauty with the videos is that you can go back and watch them again and again, and when you are ready to build that chart or do that analysis, then you can go back and refresh your memory. And I also provide all the files with all the workings and notes for people, so almost word for word what I say on the video is in the files that you can download. So, you know, for me, I like to skim read. When I watch a video, it's great because it gives me that visual teaching that I like, but I don't want to have to go back and watch it again. I would just want to get to the answer, so the files are there as a sort of a second resource. I'm impatient, I'll admit it.
Fast forward.
Yeah, exactly. Get to the point. So yeah, the files sort of support it, and it's something you can keep as well after the 12 months is up. So that's kind of it in a nutshell of how the course is structured and works.
So you know what I respect the most about what you've done is not only do you write weekly, but it seems like you've actually brought the product to completion, much unlike Jordan and book on dashboards.
You might say that.
That was a low blow.
Bam, bam, bam.
So I would like to hear, say, all three of you, since you deal with dashboards so intensively, what would you say a dashboard is, and why do you treat it like its own thing?
Go on, Jordan.
You're putting me on the spot on this one.
Haven't you written the opening to your book yet?
I have.
Haven't you written the intro?
This is a good question. No, this is a good question. No, it's a fair point. So the first thing to note is that a lot of people will say dashboard. What they mean is not actually a dashboard. So the purpose of a dashboard, first and foremost, is monitoring. So you know, a lot of people will create what is an interactive Excel application, but it may not monitor anything, or it may be a type of model in which you have inputs and then you run something and then you have an output. And it may have data visualization elements that share with the development of, or they are in kind with what dashboards have, but dashboards are strictly for monitoring, so they present a high-level view. And you know, some people may disagree with me on this, but I would say that dashboards are mainly descriptive, whereas what I would call a decision support system is mainly prescriptive and somewhat predictive in in the information it gives. So dashboards can have predictive analytics on it, in that, you know, this is what we think you're going to do in the future. But the main point of the dashboard is to say what we're doing right now. So descriptive. So what has been and how does that help our decisions going forward, versus a decision support system is prescriptive, saying here are the actions that you need to take going forward to get the desired result based on this model. So that sounds like a whole bunch of techno babble here, but at the end of the day, and I'll say this, the truth is that making them, it's not really any different. And some people aren't purists, and I used to be more of a purist, so my book Dashboards is probably going to deal with decision support systems too, or really interactive Excel applications, as people like to call them. I remember I was talking to Robert Mundigal once, and he said, it really doesn't matter what you call these things. Call them tomato soup if you want. So I do believe there is a difference in application, but I would not be surprised if, and maybe we already are on the path of blurring that line and saying that maybe there isn't a difference. So I hope that was just to kind of give you a history and also my opinion on this, which is I used to feel strongly about it, and I don't really as much anymore.
And
I think,
Mynda, yeah.
I was just going to say, although my course is called Excel Dashboards, I teach so many different aspects of Excel and so many techniques that actually what you learn can be applied in lots of scenarios in your day-to-day work. And I constantly get emails from people saying, I'm only a third away through the course, but I'm already using some of the techniques that you've taught me in other things. So, you know, whether you produce a dashboard at the end of the day or some other interactive model that provides information, you know, that you need for your job, it doesn't really matter what you call it. What you learn in these skills are so broad in their application that, you know, it's a really good, I think, founding for Excel. It's a good broad understanding of all the different aspects of Excel. So whether it's a dashboard or something else, it doesn't really matter. Like Jordan said, can blur the lines.
So why treat dashboarding as its own thing?
Because that's what people know. They hear the word, it's a buzzword, they hear it's in demand, they want to learn it. I think it's the way that reporting is sort of going. When I was using Excel years ago in my job, we hadn't heard of dashboards, but really what we were doing was similar. It just didn't have a name, and it didn't have a good structure, and you didn't know the design principles that go with dashboards and that can be applied in lots of things. So it's really just a word, I think, a label that people know, but not necessarily is what the end result is of what they produce in the end. Isn't necessarily a dashboard.
And, I think it's worth at least when you first started out doing this, to make that distinction only because some people will say, I want a dashboard, and it's important to know what they're asking for and what you're sort of expected to deliver. And I think the Stephen Few definition is actually very important. It tells us a lot about what businesses ought to be interested in terms of, and a goal for a dashboard. If you, at the end of the day, you want to make a dashboard, not necessarily just an interactive application. So I do think that there is sort of a difference right now, but I used to be a purist on it, but I've sort of learned that if you are just too dogmatic on one thing, you sort of cut off your imagination. And as we talk about weird Excel later today, we want to talk about don't cut off your imagination. Sort of think outside the box, think outside the cell is what I say in the book. So there's a preview for it. But so it is very important to think differently and to leave that open.
Yeah, so I'll jump in on that. I think maybe the distinction makes a little bit more sense whenever you're not talking about Excel, right? So whenever you're talking about other tools that don't have some of the functionality that Excel has, calling something a dashboard versus a report makes a lot more sense because you're looking at different functionality of what reporting tools can deliver at that point. For example, many of the dashboarding tools that are out there in the industry won't allow you to drill down, or they won't allow you to drag and drop in the way a pivot table will. And so making a distinction in what the tool can do and what it is expected to deliver as a result of being a dashboard tool is an important one to make. But once you get into Excel, where you can do not only high-level summary, highly graphical things that you would expect to see in a dashboard, but you could also deliver reporting. You could also deliver things that look like drill-down reporting or drag and drop through pivot tables and things like that. The line becomes a lot more blurry when you have a tool as flexible as Excel.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense there. Yeah, because the distinction between decision making versus monitoring. Yeah, you can have all of that on one page, right? And what I started calling dashboards were these summaries that I used to make, because I would have situations where there's just monstrous amounts of data throughout the spreadsheet, and okay, we need a handful of things that we need to know at a glance. Where are we with the project? Which migration started and ended on time, and which one started and is still not finished, and what states and what time zones, and where are we as far as savings and parts, and being able to summarize this stuff really neat. I started calling that a dashboard. Whether it was a dashboard or not, it's what the team needed to know at a glance.
Yeah, I'd say this is one of the things I spoke about last week, I guess during my presentation, is even knowing the difference between an operational and a strategic dashboard is an important thing to know in the first 10 minutes sometimes of having a conversation with an executive. Example, I had a client one time to where, I was the purist on a strategic dashboard, and I thought every dashboard conversation is supposed to start with a copy of the annual report. So I would go out to, I'd go out to NASDAQ or wherever. I'd get a copy of the annual report. I would read there, and I would find out how does that relate to this department, and then from there start to create KPIs and start to structure what a dashboard should look like. And that sounds great in theory, but you have to realize that probably only 20% of leaders are true analytic leaders, and are really have the appetite for that sort of an approach. Most leaders don't have the appetite for that sort of approach. They see a dashboard, or they see reporting in general as being not necessarily about building an asset, but they see it about being expense reduction. And in that case, you're not starting with an annual report. You're starting with all the reports that are already out there and figuring out how you could summarize those in a dashboard. So it's more of a bottoms-up approach, right? And getting that wrong, and I did this, right? Walking into a boardroom with an annual report, whenever they're looking to do expense reduction, and they're saying, what the hell are you coming in here with an annual report for? You're completely misaligned with what we're trying to do. It's one of those most important things you can know right off the bat. You know, is this more operational? Is it more strategic? And that's the reason I was asking Mynda a little bit, kind of around process of dashboarding. You know, as you think about the classes and things that you're.
Can I add one thing?
Okay? Sure.
Yeah, I just want to add one thing because you mentioned different things that people want to do, and I'm thinking now about a client I had a while ago where I think she pitched a project and said, if we do this, we can save $4 million. And as the project went on, she needed to know where everything was and where we were with this $4 million savings. It was all tied to things starting and ending on time, right? And she really needed that thermometer. You know, all of that other stuff had to support that thermometer. So anyway.
Yeah, one of the things in my course that I teach is there's 5 sort of key questions, and who do you ask them of? Because, you know, what one person wants from your dashboard or report will be potentially different, and their motivation for it will be different. And so to really knuckle that out in the beginning, then find out where the data is going to come from, and, you know, do a sketch. We all love Excel and want to dive in and start building charts and analyzing data and what have you, but you've really got to do that groundwork up front and understand the KPIs. What's the objective of the dashboard in the first place, and who are those sort of key people that want it, and why? And, you know, don't go and talk to the CEO's PA. Go to the CEO and find out, you know, exactly what the skinny is on it, sort of thing. So yeah, I teach that in my course as well at the very beginning.
Yeah.
So a little bit later today, Mynda, you're going to walk us through an example, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Well, I appreciate that. So thank you so much, Mynda. Would you mind sticking around for
Sure. Yeah.
the rest of today?
Yeah,
Okay,
so
would like to go ahead.
Was there?
Go ahead. Go ahead, Oz.
Yeah. Oh, I was just. Oh man. I thought back. Yeah, Mynda's talking about talking with the CEO and whoever else, getting feedback and everything. And then as a freelancer, I really have to get a whole lot of information up front, because if I've quoted them a flat rate, I'm not a guy that goes in 40 hours a week and just does stuff. So I get a good sense of what they need and then give them a flat rate. And things have to go. There's no, oh, I asked the wrong person, now let me go back and then I'm going to send you a bill for all this time. I got to get a clear sense right up front of what they need.
So I have something I want to ask everyone while we're thinking about dashboards. There's a lot of different software programs we could use. So the real question that we should be asking, or at least I want to ask everyone, is why Excel? I mean, are certain things harder to do in Excel, certain things easier? What makes Excel the choice in certain cases, and when shouldn't you use it? When is it better to use, I don't know what the QlikView, Salesforce, I guess, has these other dashboarding products?
Everyone has Excel. It's almost free, isn't it? In some ways it's free. I think that's the one of the appeals with it. And you can do a huge amount with Excel. I haven't had any experience of other other dashboard products, so I can't comment on whether they'd be better. I suppose if you've got it, then probably they would, but yeah, Excel's just so widespread.
I would say that what you can do in Excel, you can do it just way more quickly than you can do in many of these other products. So in terms of the grasp of the data it can manage, it's not as good, but it may be getting there with the new BI tools, as say Tableau. But in terms of what, if you have a vision and what you want to do in terms of layout, design, implementation, from start to execution, Excel is really fast and inexpensive solution.
But see, now, I try to not be, become a broken record with some of the things that I say, but looking at the ease of use of another tool, that strips down the reality. Because if Salesforce.com was the same price as Excel, you still need somebody to learn that thing. The back end of that thing is hell. And then, Tableau might be easy, but $999 a person, okay. And then a lot of these things, they're one-trick ponies too. So even if something is, $20 a month, it's only going to do dashboards. It's not also going to be a timesheet. And
yeah, I would agree with you, Oz.
Yeah, that's a great point. I never even thought about that.
Yeah, I would agree with you. Kind of the number one benefit, I would say, is from Excel. Not only is it on everyone's top for the most part, but it's flexibility.
Yes.
Now, if you're looking at some of the other tools, some of what you're giving up in flexibility, sometimes what you're getting is some feature richness. Just with a lot of the widgets and different things that you could do, or even the ability to distribute. Being able to distribute through the server and things like that. So, there are benefits of other tools, and so as a result, if you look at some competing suites of tools, and we'll use SAP as an example, but you could go to Oracle or any of the other major business intelligence vendors, Cognos or Business Objects or any of those, and a lot of times they have to have 6 different tools. 6 or 7 different tools to be able, one's a dashboarding tool, one's a drag and drop tool, one's a drill down reporting tool, and there ends up needing to be in a slew of just different tools where you do get some feature richness as a result of that, but you do with Excel you really just have a lot more flexibility, I think.
And I don't want to be here this blind Excel evangelist. I'm in favor of whatever tool works and is available to you. And if you got $999 a person for Tableau, use it. I don't care. But, my clients tend to be too small for that. And I did have a client that signed up for Tableau, paid the money, started using it, and then the learning curve was just too much of a distraction.
So I'll tell you this. I'll tell you this, Oz. In any of the major BI vendors, I work with 1 or 2 of them pretty extensively. The most important tool that I demo, for glossiness and everything else, is usually the dashboarding tool. But whenever you're getting down to the analysts, the people who are really going to use the tool, the most important tool that I ever demo is always the tool that is the Excel add-in. The tool that has an Excel that adds into Excel that allows you to connect directly to SAP data, that allows you to connect directly to Oracle data, or whatever your ERP system is, whatever your database is. That is by far the most important tool that you roll out.
Mm-hmm.
So there you have it. Excel is the best.
Yeah, Excel's here to stay. Excel's here to stay, no doubt about it.
That's why this is not Cognos TV.
Did we answer your question, Mr. J Lookup?
Yeah, you did. No, wait. I got to say that because I've done the sales pitch on the inexpensive side, but I never even thought, and it seems like now incredibly obvious, that yeah, it's more than just a dashboard tool. It does all the other great things that aren't necessarily dashboards. And one other thing I was thinking about, because I've heard this from clients before, is that they bought this big vendor package, and then they're like, oh, we need this chart, we need that chart. The vendor's like, okay, well, here's your maintenance fees, and we'll put that in there for you. And then they put that in their chart library, and they start selling it to other people. And remember, she was telling me, she's like, I came up with that chart. That's my chart, and now they're selling it to someone. So one cool thing about Excel is the extensibility of the charts, and sort of the creativity element that you can do a lot of different things with it.
Oh, yeah.
Which is